All right, hello and welcome everyone to today's webinar, Self-Publish Your Genealogy, a panel discussion with authors. I'm Kathleen McKenzie, Education and Programming Manager here at American Ancestors, New England Historic Genealogical Society. And American Ancestors is a nonprofit organization supported by our members and donors. We provide resources and expertise in nearly all aspects of family history, and we're pleased to offer such programming for our members and friends around the world. This program today is brought to you by the Brew Family Learning Center. We will be offering a free handout to accompany this webinar. You will receive an email tomorrow with a link to download it, and we'll be sure to include all resources compiled by our panelists, as well as anything that they mention here today. Moderating today's panel discussion is Vice President of Publishing, Sharon Inglis. In over 35 years in the publishing industry, Sharon has developed, edited, and directed the production of hundreds of books on a wide variety of subjects. At NEHGS, she uses her editorial and project management experience to produce all of our books and our 2 journals. So without further ado, I'll turn things over to Sharon.
Hi, everyone. Welcome. It's great to be here with you this afternoon to help you realize your goal of publishing your family history. I am sure that our 3 authors' varied experience will be a huge benefit to you all. Mary Gilchrist has published books on both her paternal and maternal lines. She excels at providing historical context to shed light on the lives of her ancestors. That's Mary in the middle there. Anne Hanson writes narrative nonfiction that is organized like a genealogical detective story. Her book is about the true identities of her paternal grandparents, and that's Mary on the right. Jenifer Kahn Bakkala on the left specializes in a biographical and narrative approach to family history. She has worked on books for the Newbury Street Press imprint of American Ancestors, adding compelling stories to the genealogical framework of our projects. Now I'm going to allow, we'll each appear live, I believe, and I'm going to allow each of our panelists to tell you a bit more about themselves. We're going to start with Mary.
Yes, I'm a microbiologist. I spent many years helping diagnose diseases and break up pandemics, retired before the COVID one, which made me very happy. And then I finally had time to do more of the research that I'd already been doing since 1983 about. And it's been very rewarding. I'll show you the picture of the 2 books that I have published. The first one came out in 2017, and it contains on the front a beautiful iconic photograph of the Mary Fisher Quaker tapestry that's in a museum in England, and she happens to be a very early ancestor of my father. But the entire book is devoted to basically all his ancestors. So the iconic part of it is a little bit misleading. On the other side is the history of all of the ancestors of my mother, who was a Parker, and the iconic photograph of a tree growing in the middle of an intersection, which is here in Iowa. So that summarizes my experiences. I've had a lot of fun doing these works.
It's kind of like a natural rotary, Mary, the tree in the middle of the intersection. Yeah. All right, thank you. Now we're going to go to Anne Hanson.
Yes, hi everyone. My book, Buried Secrets, is the true genealogical detective story about how I discovered the hidden past that my paternal grandparents, Frank and Ida Hanson, took to their graves. Our family quest got started during my dad's childhood in Akron, Ohio in the 1930s and 40s. His parents, Frank and Ida, were totally secretive about their pasts. It was taboo for my dad to ask about their families back in Brooklyn, New York. Decades later, my dad asked my sisters and I to research his family history. And although we researched every conceivable source for the next 20 years, we could not confirm a single supposed fact of the Hanson family tree. Finally, in the year 2000, my dad came into possession of my grandparents' long hidden photo collection. And one crooked photo of a grave showing a fragment of a fuzzy inscription provided the tiny clue that led to my first big break and ultimately allowed me to tear down the brick wall that my grandparents had built to hide their true past. My findings shocked my dad, but he was actually the first to say I should write a book. And I thought, I've been a corporate writer, I've been a reporter, how hard could this be? And I had no idea what I was getting into. But I took classes at the Grub Street Writing Center in Boston, and I learned how to write book-length narrative nonfiction. So in Buried Secrets, I've tried to write a page turner that reads like a novel, but is based on scrupulous research.
All right. Thanks, Anne. And now we'll move to Jenifer.
I am Jenifer Kahn Bakkala. I have been a freelance writer for American Ancestors for about 8 years. I also am a proofreader for the Register and the American Ancestors magazine. I have also done some self-publishing, and I have self-published 3 books. The most recent is the Maynard North and DeForest families, and that is the story of the ancestry of Sally Maynard Davis, and it involves 2 immigrants, one from Ireland and one from England, who come to America. That I published with a publishing house, and it came out in 2021. 2 Gold Rings is the story of a Jewish family who escaped the Holocaust and built a new life in New York City. And that book came out in 2022, and I published that with an online publisher. And that is actually available for public purchase, even though it was a private client project. He wanted to have it available to anyone who wanted to read it. The first project I ever did that I would call self-publishing is the history of my own family. And the book is called Our Ancestors, A History of 2 Jones Families. That I published in 2012, and I did it on my desktop computer and printed it out and punched holes and sent it to my whole family. So I have had experience with all different kinds of self-publishing.
Great. Thank you, everyone. We're going to get started today with some questions that we as a group identified for the panel. So the first one of those is, how do you organize your research? And we're going to start with Jenifer.
I think that one of the things to recognize when you are thinking about publishing something is that the moment that you think you're starting, you've really already started. And when you decide that you need to organize your project, you really need to organize it from the inside out. And you need to come up with a system that will accommodate what you have already done. And so the first step is really evaluating what you have and seeing sort of what categories it all falls into. I use a colored folder system. I have a folder for each couple. I have a folder for each place that I'm researching, and each occupation, all the sort of characters in the story, the human ones and the non-human ones, get a folder. And that helps me stay organized. But the thing I think that organizes me the most is I'm a big fan of writing as you go. And I write and research throughout the process of working on a book. I have one document, and that one document has everything in it. I plug in all of the information that I have. I put links in there. I put charts of deeds in there. I put notes to myself about things that I'd like to research in the future. That keeps it all in one place. And then it's very easy to just use search and find the thing that I'm looking for. But I find that I have in the past had a couple of documents going, you know, one for deeds, one for this, one for that. It ends up being very confusing. I really sort of like to have that one place to find everything.
Okay. That I like that approach. That's the approach that I use as well, or I like us to use on our book projects. Mary, what do you have to add to that?
Well, I would have to say that I didn't necessarily think I was going to write these two books when I started doing the research. I was creating pedigrees and making interesting observations about the people who appeared in the pedigrees. So I had file folders of surnames of lines, ancestral lines, some of whom had so much information that I had to individualize their file folders. But then when I finally decided to try to write the books, I thought at the time I didn't have enough for one book. I ended up writing 700 and some pages, but in the two books. At that time, I had all these file folders just overwhelming the space available in our house. And so I sat down to write, and as I finished a chapter on an individual in a colony or in a state, I discarded all the information in my file folders. So I ended up with a completely empty cupboard, which had been filled with information. And that was quite a good thing to happen when you're trying to downsize as you get older. And I have to say that I agree with Jenifer. The pedigrees that I had and the information I had didn't make a story, really. I was dedicated to the fact that I wanted to place these ancestors in history. So the entire time I was writing, which I was going by chapter, I had individual files by chapter, I was doing research, and the research was based on local family histories, local county histories. It was based on books that I could find digitized online. And I was fascinated with all the information that was available to me to really illustrate the lives of these people. You go back to the Puritans and you find in Massachusetts, for example, that they're experiencing incredibly interesting lives that are so very foreign to us, the way they think about families, the way they think about how people should be managed, the different jobs they have. So even if you don't exactly know what your ancestor was doing back there in Plymouth Colony or whatever, you know what he was experiencing, the kinds of environments that they were in. And that for me was really a fascinating story, that as the descendants began to migrate west, I began to ask questions about, well, what methods did they use to migrate to the west? Did they take a wagon? And sure enough, in Conestoga, Pennsylvania, that's where the Conestoga wagons were being built. So anybody that migrated into this country through Philadelphia got their Conestoga wagon there and headed west and usually south. So if you thought that Conestoga wagons were always starting in St. Louis, Missouri and heading west, you got a surprise. And from there on, you learn a lot about the stagecoaches that were crossing the state of Pennsylvania, how slow the wagons were, how much faster the stagecoaches were. And you have to be kind of interested in trivia to think that this is fascinating stuff, but I've always been interested in how did canals work and how did riverboats on the Ohio River get people to the west. Sure enough, they didn't take those fancy riverboats, the steamboats. They took flatboats with all their cattle and all their wagons on the flatboats. And so for me, the entire project has just been a huge learning experience for myself, and I really enjoyed it.
I noticed that we had noted when we were talking before about how you organize around time and place, and I guess those are some good examples of that. I don't know if Anne has anything to add to that, or should we move to the next question?
Well, I'll just jump in and say I totally resonated with what Jenifer said about putting everything in one document. I didn't put all my research in one document, but all of my drafts are full of to-do notes that are related to research that I need to do. And so I just kind of very much agree with that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love when there's something you have to do, you can put it in like pointy brackets, you can highlight it in yellow so it jumps
Exactly.
out at you. But you're
Exactly.
never gonna forget to do it or lose the little post-it note you wrote the reminder on if you put it right there in your
Yeah.
manuscript
And I
file.
always use to-do, square brackets, so you
Mm-hmm.
can always find all of them.
Yep. Yep. And as you get those things done, they're going to disappear and your
Exactly.
work is going to grow.
Some are very stubborn and they take a while, but yes.
Well, that's true. You should pick a highlight color that you like then. Okay, so the second question we have is, how do you know when to stop researching and start writing? And Anne, I want to start with you on this one.
Sure. Well, it's never time to stop researching. We all love research, but no, seriously, when the bulk of your initial research is done and you know how you want to start telling the story, it's time to start writing. So I started seriously writing around 2007, and I had a really solid draft by 2011. And then life intervened and took me away from the writing for a while. And then in 2019, I began one big final revision, which involved changing the structure, adding a lot of chapters. And all of this required significant new research. I also think in talking about researching versus writing, just the act of writing and self-editing often reveals gaps in the data or in the historical context, or just raises new questions that you didn't think of while you were doing the initial research. So, so again, this is where my to-do notes come in. To do, check on the date this house was built. To do, get more information on this lineage society. To do, we need more information on women's clothing in the 1920s, because I might have a scene where I'm describing characters in the 1920s. Or you might just need to flesh out information on particular characters. So I think we probably all would agree that, but I know it certainly was the case for me, writing my book, it was an iterative process of research, writing, revision, then rinse and repeat.
And I like the fact, Anne, that you use to do as the reminder to yourself, and also you can search your document for the words to do and find those things. Say you forgot to highlight one of them in yellow or forgot to make it red in the pointy brackets.
Right.
I say pointy brackets because in publishing, anything that's inside pointy brackets means like do not put this in the actual book.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah.
So you call it out that way and separate it from the content of the manuscript, but by having to do or to com TK, it's something you can search for as another way of finding all those things that you need to do.
Right. Yeah.
Hi, Jenifer, what do you have to say on when to stop researching and start writing? Although you said that you kind of do the two at the same time.
I do. And I'm researching up until the end. And I agree with Anne. I think that as you find out things, you say, oh, what can I add to that? But I noticed that in the beginning of any big project, time and scope are fighting against each other all the time. You're saying, what do I have time to do? And what do I want to do? And I think the point at which time wins out is the point at which you kind of say to yourself, I'm just not going to look anything else up. And sometimes time wins out because you have a deadline that someone else has given you. Sometimes you have a deadline because it's a self-imposed deadline. You want to give this as a holiday gift to someone. You have, big things coming up in your life and you say, I need to get it done by this time. I think that's when you really start to say, that rabbit hole that I really, really was interested in is unfortunately not going to be part of my book. That's going to be another book. And this one is not going to include that. And I think that's, I think that the final stage is one of trimming. And that's usually when it's hard to do. Sometimes I have to tell myself, okay, you're doing it again. You need to stop and honor time rather than scope.
Mm-hmm. What do you have to say on this topic, Mary?
Well, I've been retired a few years and was trying to ascend every brick wall you might have ever encountered. And finally, American Ancestors posted a session, not unlike this one, a little bit more prolonged, about, say, 2013, on how to publish and write. And the bottom line, which was the most important information that I got, was you got to stop researching. You've got to start writing. And so I followed that discipline. It was the easiest bit of information in the entire program, and I followed it to the T. I devoted over a year of writing and research, many hours per day, to the first book, and then I thought I'd never do the second book. But along came the pandemic, and I had a lot of free time, so I wrote the book, getting up at 6 in the morning and working till about 4 p.m. pretty much every day. And I really enjoyed it, and it's been a wonderful experience.
Okay, all good information. So now let's pretend that you've finished your research and your writing. The next question we came up with is, who should you get to review and potentially edit your work? And I thought we'd start with Jenifer for this one.
I actually have found great value in having someone review my work even before I'm finished. I usually send out what I have so far as it's kind of come into place. I find a friend, a family member, somebody who might not be a genealogist. I had a friend who had surgery and she was bored. I said, oh, good, you can read this. I think that the danger in that, though, is sometimes people will say, oh, well, you have a typo on page 7. I think it's important to say, what I want to know is, does it hold together? Are you interested? Did you want to turn the next page? Was there anything that didn't make any sense? I think that that's very valuable. I think, however, in the end, it's really important to self-edit, but it's really important to get somebody else to edit also. And I have done a number of things. I have traded editing with people where I edit theirs and they edit mine. I have hired an editor, and I have, in the most recent book that I did, I looked for a certified genealogist who would review it and make sure that it adhered to advanced standards. You can't do it all yourself. Do not go it alone. And there are 2 really good reasons for that. Number one, you as much as you think you can, you will never be able to approach your work as a reader. The second one is that either you can either lose confidence or you can get overconfident by not having somebody be there with you in it. And both of those are pretty dangerous.
Good point. How about you, Anne? What advice do you have on that?
Now, here I'm going to diverge a little bit from Jenifer, and I would say hire a professional, not family and friends, because your family, they love everything you do. Friends, I guess I was talking about a book length narrative nonfiction, which is a little bit different than the genealogies that Jenifer focuses on. So I would hire a professional, and anyone that you are considering hiring should be willing to do a a test run of your material before you hire them. So if you're hiring a copy editor, they should copy edit 10 pages. If you're hiring a structural editor, they should be willing to, read the first chapter and give you comments. And then the other thing is anyone who you're considering hiring, they should present themselves in an extremely polished manner. If you see even the tiniest grammatical error or inconsistency, move on. Because if that's how they're presenting themselves to the world, I mean, with the information they most care about, that sort of tells you something about how your work will be treated. I know in 2019, I was revising and I was struggling with some structural issues, and I hired a wonderful writing coach, Alita Winterheimer at Word Essential. And she didn't actually make any edits to my manuscript, but she read my book and she helped me think about my book and my writing in a different way so that I could make the edits that I needed to make and write a better book. And like everyone I hired, Ali did a test drive with a portion of my manuscript before I hired her. And I've also done well. I found a wonderful copy editor through a portal called Readsy. And then there's also a great organization called Editorial Freelancers Association, where you could find a proofreader or a copy editor. So there's a lot of great resources out there.
Okay, thanks. Mary, what about you? I don't think I've called on you yet, have I? No, I haven't.
You haven't. I relied on several family members, my sister being the English teacher who did a lot of the copy editing. I don't think anybody did quite the job of helping me edit out the complications in my book that I might have benefited from if I'd had a paid editor who was a formal editor. And perhaps that was something that should have been done. I did ask the oldest member of my mother's generation of descendants to look at the scandals in the family, because I wanted to put some of the scandals in. I think that if you didn't find any scandals in your genealogy research, you probably didn't look hard enough, but families usually bury their scandals, and I had found a number of them. I wanted to know, should I include them? And the answer was that we came to was the scandals can go in if there's print media that describes them, but if it's just a rumor, then it can't go in. And sure enough, there were newspaper articles. People were going to find those newspaper articles if they were curious enough. So why not put it in and use the scandal to justify that the next generation survived? They did great. They succeeded in not having problems that their father had, for example. So that was my editing experience.
Okay, thank you. The next question we identified was, what resources can you use for getting your work published? And we're going to start with you, Mary, on this.
Well, I relied on actually getting back to American Ancestors after I took the course and saying, okay, you told me I should go ahead and write a book and stop researching now. How am I going to get it published? And I believe I got the names of 3 publishing institutions that I then wrote to and asked for their information. And the feedback that I got from them was what taught me which one to go with, because from one of the 3, I got the most informative outline on how to proceed, and really in only a couple or 3 pages to get your book ready for publication. And so I chose that. It happened to be Otter Bay, which is going to be on your list tomorrow when you get it. And the beautiful covers of my 2 books were actually designed by the woman who is now going to head up Otter Bay. So if you thought that those covers were beautiful, then, and the fact that if you find that that outline helps you a lot, then that might be the place for you to go. I think you have to make your own individual decision. Sometimes it depends on If you're just publishing to give the books away, which was my circumstance, to my family members, I published about 128 of each of the 2 books and gave them away, then your publisher isn't quite the same problem making that decision as if you're hoping to sell your books, and a publisher might really contribute to that. So that was my own particular decision.
Jenifer, what about you?
As I said, as we opened, I've done a variety of things. Genealogy House publishers published my most recent book, and they really took me from start to finish and provided editing and proofreading, layout, the whole thing. And that was a great experience to be in really, really good hands. The book that I published before that, 2 Gold Rings, I cobbled together a lot of different resources in order to do that. And I have to put in a plug for the Association of Professional Genealogists. I think there is somebody on their list of profiles who does whatever it is that you need. There are layout artists, there are editors, there are proofreaders. And in that way, I think if you want to do an online publishing option, you can really pull a lot of very, very sophisticated resources into your publication. I used Lulu to publish the one that I did online, and basically you submit to them a finished PDF, and it can be, a Word document that you've made into a PDF, or it can be something that's been laid out and really professionally designed. And I think that you can decide for yourself how many resources you want to put in and how many you want to do on your own in that way. Yeah.
Okay. Anne, what do you think?
Yeah, well, my goal was to sell the book, both print and digital on Amazon. Unsurprisingly, given what I've already said, is I chose to hire someone to help me. I hired a wonderful wife-husband team, Victoria and Richard Wolf of Wolf Design and Marketing. Victoria did all of the design, layout, formatting of the book, while Rich did all of the logistical and setup that needed to be done on Amazon. I was very happy with them. I found them through, I think it's a great organization called the Alliance of Independent Authors. It's a great group for self-publishing authors. They also have recommended resources, and that is how I found Victoria and Rich.
Okay, great. All right, now you can probably tell that the order that we've done these questions that we've prescribed is sort of in the order in which you go through the book project. So now we are talking about how can you market your book. And I think we'll start with Anne for that.
Yes, well, beyond the personal networking of family and friends, which is the important starting point, I tried a little bit of everything with a focus on the genealogy community. So what has worked best for me is, I guess, first of all, email marketing to genealogy and history societies and to genealogy influencers. I've also done a lot of presentations for, again, genealogy and history societies, libraries, podcasts, book clubs. I'll be doing some at women's clubs. So if a group wants me, I will share my book with them. I've pitched some newspapers for reviews, and I was fortunate enough to get reviews in the Akron Beacon Journal and the Twin Cities Pioneer Press. And I guess a key thing I did was sort of tie-ins and cross-marketing. So for example, when the Akron newspaper review came out, I sent an email to all genealogy organizations in Ohio saying, hey, look at this great review I got, and quoted the review. And since it's Ohio, they would have some interest in it. I did the same thing. Megan Smoleniak praised my book in her newsletter, so you can be sure I sent out an email to genealogy organizations about that. Same thing with Dick Eastman and the New York Genealogical and Biographical Society. If I got good reviews, I sent out emails to either nationally or, like in the case of New York, to New York organizations. In terms of social media, I probably used Facebook the most. I actually want to give a shout out to a lovely Facebook group called the Genealogical Crime Mystery Book Club. They are avid readers, and they have been very supportive of me and my book. So I guess the last piece of marketing, again, this is for somebody who is selling on Amazon. Whenever someone says something nice about my book, I thank them and I ask if they might take a quick minute to leave a review on Amazon or Goodreads. The Amazon reviews actually are really important because the number of reviews drives whether your book will be shown to somebody who is browsing in Amazon. So I do consider my audience is readers of memoir, suspense, and family history. But there's so many books and authors out there. To me, it made sense to focus on the genealogy market. And of course, many genealogists love to read and love mysteries. And so I've been very gratified with the response from the genealogy community.
Great. Okay, let's see, Mary, did you do any marketing?
I elected to give the book away because there were people in the family who might not be able to afford it if I tried to sell it. And I didn't want to deny anybody access to it. And I personally didn't want to ask everybody if they wanted to buy the book when I didn't know what the cost was going to be. The fewer that wanted to buy it, the greater the cost. And I just decided that for me, it was going to be easier to give it away. So I sent it to the libraries of the local history societies and the like that I thought might keep the book on hand for at least a few decades, as well as to family members. And actually, I'm running very short. It was popular to the point of, I don't think there were too many other people that really would have paid the amount that I would have had to charge to make even the slightest profit off of these two books. So worked for me, and I'm happy with the outcome.
How about you, Jenifer?
I think I can echo both Anne and Mary. Put it out for review and give it for free to people who you think will talk about it. And I've done both of those. And also I've entered my books into contests, and even if they don't win, you get a mention there. Usually a little write-up. So that's a good method also.
And sometimes they do win.
Sometimes they do win.
Yeah. Okay, so the last question that we had identified was, how do you manage your time? I have everyone we were going to ask on this, so I guess why don't we jump back to Mary?
Okay, I sort of referred to that before. In the time period of the first book, I was trying to beat a schedule. My sister, the English teacher, did have cancer, and I wanted her to see the book after she'd read so many of the chapters. So I was working really hard. I have a bad back. I was lying on my sofa. I had my laptop on my hips, and I was using the file folders across my sofa, throwing them in the trash bin beside the sofa. And I was working usually very intensively for several days or weeks at a time. And then I was taking breaks and doing holiday trips and international travel just to release some of the tension. But frankly, when you're working on genealogical work, sometimes you remember quite a bit if you work on it in a time frame that doesn't stop for a while. And then when you finish a chapter, it's time to take a break. Similarly, with starting on the other book, the second book, I started on a book early, actually before the COVID pandemic started, but I ran into some problems getting the outline that I had going. I stopped for 6 months. And then in the middle of the COVID outbreak, I had all the time in the world. So I'm back on my back, lying on the sofa with my laptop on my hips, working at least 10 hours every day. And I didn't take as many trips or international trips during the COVID outbreak, but I did take breaks. Mm-hmm. So managing time, I found it was really important to keep working intensively.
Okay. Anne, what do you think?
Well, my situation was I was working full time pretty much the entire time I was writing the book. So my time management strategy was, if I get an hour here or an hour there, I'm working on the book. I remember once going to a doctor and I had a sheaf of paper, and I was working away, and he came in and said, "Oh, you're really busy." But at any rate, one thing, there's two things about it. One is, I think the busier you are, the more productive you are, I think, because you have to manage your time well because there's so little of it. But the other time management issue was related to what we were talking about earlier about research versus writing, and how you absolutely, as you write, you find areas that you need to research. However, do you need to research it for half an hour, or do you find it so fascinating that all of a sudden 4 hours is gone and you've spent that 4 hours researching something that is going to have just one sentence in the book? So that, I think, in terms of organizing myself, I always had to rein myself in on that.
How about you, Jenifer?
I think whether I'm working on a book as part of my career or I'm doing it on my own, I give myself a deadline, and I really find that having interim deadlines is very valuable. I will have this amount finished at this point, and I give myself some little mileposts so that I can know that I'm on track. I'm pretty deliberate about planning. I decide how many hours I'm going to spend, and then I find that if I double that, it's about right at the end. And then I block it off. One of the things that I find really helpful with time is to think about tasks that are small tasks and large tasks. And I put aside an hour to go through and say, fix a formatting thing, or to see how many times I've mentioned something, or look for little things. And then I will often block off and say, I'm going to do 4 hours on this, and I'm turning off my phone. I'm locking the door. I'm not talking to anybody, and I just go very intensively for 4 hours. I find that those two things are very, very helpful in terms of time and in terms of me thinking about what I'm going to get done when.
Okay, that's all great advice. I've been taking a peek at the questions that have been coming in, and one of them I noticed was, let me see, how many books do you suggest? One big book, a book by family, a book by story? I mean, most often, as was evidenced by what Mary did, and actually Jenifer did one book on the Davis family for American Ancestors for me, and then her other book, which won an award that she showed in the middle book in her cover photos, was on the other side of that family's ancestry. I can't remember which came first. Well, no, it was Davis, so that was the paternal, and then the maternal side was the one that you did on your own with Genealogy House. So that's often how people organize the research. It seems like usually someone is more interested in one side or the other because of a special relationship with a grandmother or a grandfather, or just one family seems to have a lot of mysteries that they want to solve. For whatever reason, it's more meaningful to you, and that's usually where people start. I mean, if your research is shallow, and I don't mean that in a negative way, but if it doesn't go very far back, you could put both sides in one book, but it might help you to organize yourself and organize your time to do one followed by the other side of the family. Another question I saw there was about footnotes and what you use to put your one document for your whole manuscript in. And that, I mean, what we usually use is Microsoft Word, but there's all kinds of free versions of word processing software that you can also use. But if you use Microsoft Word, you can have the footnotes there. We usually, in our work at American Ancestors, keep the footnotes as footnotes at the bottom of the page while we're writing and editing, because then you can just look down and see everything right there at the bottom of the page. Oftentimes, I mean, the footnotes serve two purposes. They are your source documentation. If you're writing anything that relies on primary source documents or records to back up what you're saying when this person was born, married, died, that's in your footnote. And then once you turn to actually publishing the book, it's very easy in Word to just go up and select and change those footnotes to be endnotes if you want. Another question that I saw was about putting images in your book. And what we do is, if we're going to have a lot of images in a book, we always put the source citations as endnotes, because what that does is it opens up the book page to give you more real estate for maps and family photos. If you try to put maps and family photos and footnotes at the bottom of the page, your pages are going to be very choppy, and it's going to be very hard to lay out your book. You can lay your book out in Word, or you can lay it out in a program like InDesign. But either way, if you're going to have a lot of images, you probably want to put those footnotes, those source citations, at the end of the book to give yourself more space. What was the other thing I was going to say? Oh, and then there was a question about copyright. If you are using something from another book and it's more than just a few lines, you should request permission to use that content from the rights holder. Of course, with images, if it's an image that's not in the public domain, you need to request permission to use that image. Oftentimes, in order to get a high-res file of that image, you need to pay the rights holder to get a high-res file. And a high-res file is what you need if you're going to publish your book. In order for it to look good as a print publication, you're going to need a high-res file. One of the things I always say is, even if you got a photo from Aunt Sally, it's courteous to credit Aunt Sally for giving you that photo. Say that it's from the collection of, Sally Jones or whatever, just so other family members can, so people can be recognized. People like to be recognized for anything that belongs to them or any kind of help that they may have given you. So let's see, those were the questions that I found. And Kathleen, I think you said you were going to send me some if you saw them and I didn't, and you thought they were important.
Sure, yeah, absolutely. So let me just pull some of these up here. All right, so yes, so we did have folks who were very curious to know from all of you kind of how you choose what to put in your books. And I know, Sharon, you touched on this a little bit as well, but maybe I'll just throw it out to the three of you if you want to talk about how you decided kind of what branch to focus on, whether you wanted to have everything in one book or kind of split it up. I know, of course, Jenifer and Mary, you've done different books. So yeah, if anyone wants to talk about how you kind of chose the scope. Mary, if you'd like to go ahead.
Because I was going to give the book away to family members, I chose to focus on one side of my family and give them that book, and focus on the other side of my family and give those family members that book. That was an easy decision. And since I was covering maybe as 5 generations, I had a lot of material, so I did end up with 2 very thick books, and it worked, I think, pretty well.
All right, Jenifer, if you'd like to add to that.
I agree with Mary. I did that also. I did one book for the Jones family and one book for the Kahn family. And then for my siblings who share both families, I combined those into one book, both families. So I kind of had modular units that I would use to, but I think it speaks to the larger issue, which is consider your audience. And I've always had the audience for whatever book I'm writing in the back of my mind. What will be interesting to them? What will be interesting to the people who I want to read this book? That I find is a huge guide, and often a way, as I said at the end, to trim. When sometimes I'll look at something and say, this is so interesting to me because I had fun researching it, but I think that the audience for this book is not going to care about this detail. I think that really helps.
All right, great. Thank you. I saw we also had several questions from folks curious to know what sort of app or word processing software that you use to write in. Do you just use Microsoft Word or something a little bit more specialized? Throwing that out to all of you. Anne, if you'd like to start, maybe.
Sure. I used Microsoft Word. And yeah, I used Microsoft Word. I did use their footnote capabilities to a slight extent. But yes, I'm a Word girl.
Me too. Word all the way.
Yeah.
A few of my colleagues love Scrivener, and I lasted about 15 minutes, but I think that's because I just am already thinking in Word.
I, in fact, did not use Microsoft Word. I used a free product called LibreOffice. It's, I think, equivalent to Microsoft Word. I had used Microsoft Word for ever and ever. But in order to get a free product, it was just an advantage to move to it. And I don't think it created very many disadvantages. It had all the facilities that I needed in there. It had good endnoting. It had good indexing, all sorts of properties that Microsoft Word has. One of my biggest problems, I think, would have been both with Word and with LibreOffice. The problem of getting your pictures and your images and your maps into the text without them complaining, jumping around and things. And I think if you do a really expensive desktop publishing software, it takes you forever to learn how to use it, but it probably is a lot more stable than these 2 products are.
Yeah, that's definitely true, Mary. It can be done, but things do tend to jump around, and the files become kind of a little bit onerous. They start to crash, and things happen if you've got too much image files in there.
All right, great. We also had a few questions come in asking about timelines and kind of having those available as you're writing. Do you like to use timelines while you're writing or including them in your book? Some folks wanted to know if you like to include kind of broader historical facts on those timelines or even climate data. So yeah, just curious about that. Mary.
with my dad's book, the Dodge family came from England. And so I put in a timeline of their lives in England and what was happening in the colonies when they were there. So I had 2 columns with the contrasting timelines of history plus their own lives. And I probably did that more than once, but that one stands out in my memory.
Yeah, Jenifer.
I think timelines are enormously helpful. I am usually writing in a chronological order when I write, even if the final product, maybe I'll start with the most interesting thing that happens and then kind of backfill. But while I'm writing and putting things together, I am saying what happened in the 1850s, what happened in the 1860s, and really doing it chronologically. I think that's the best way to stay organized as you work, and it helps you realize if you have some gaps in the story.
All right, great. Thank you. Next, we had an interesting question. Someone is working on writing their family history, but they've encountered a lot of kind of difficult material in going through that, some kind of darker stories in their family history. And I'm just wondering if that's anything that you've encountered and kind of how you've approached that when deciding what to include and how to include it, especially if you're going to gift it to family members and that kind of thing, if anyone would like to answer that.
Actually, well, I'll go after Mary.
Well, I already kind of referred to whether to include scandals or not. And I chose with my great-grandfather, who had a problem with alcoholism and had a very dark ending of his life because of it, to then say, look at those who descended from him and how well they did, that they were resilient, that they didn't follow that pattern, trying really to appeal to my readers, all of whom are relatives of one sort or another, that you can get through dark periods, that you can survive difficult times, and you just have to decide not to get into what your prior generation did or had problems with. I think that was a winner.
Yeah, I guess I'd like to actually second what Mary said about even when you find difficult situations and behaviors, the flip side is that people were strong, they survived, they took care of their families, and they had a lot of strengths that we want to focus on. So I totally agree with that approach. The other thing, though, I would like to say is usually scandals are a matter of public record. Well, if a scandal is a matter of public record, then it is true that if it happened 100 years ago, nobody now may be looking for that. But if it's a matter of public record, then it's fair game. That being said, I think you always have to balance accuracy and kindness. Does this situation, this scene, this fact, does it advance the story I'm trying to tell? Is it important to include or not? And there certainly were times where, I had information that was not central to the story and would have caused some pain, but I left it out. But information that was central to the story, all of which is a matter of public record, I did put in.
Kathleen, oh, go ahead, Jenifer. I have one thing to add after you.
Okay. I was just going to say that I often consider my audience in this regard as well. I think that when I did kind of the coffee table book for my family, I was very aware that my purpose in doing it was so that the younger people in our family could know about it. And I made sure that that was a coffee table book that a child could pick up and read. I didn't eliminate anything, but there were things that I talked about in a different way so that a young person could read it.
Mm-hmm. When you were talking earlier, I think all of you have mentioned this, like sort of when to quit digging into that rabbit hole. I think it was mostly you, Jenifer. But one thing that we have done in book projects at NEHGS, American Ancestors, is if there's something that you can't figure out where it fits into the story, but you think it's important and you haven't been able to dig as deeply as you had hoped or planned, there's always the appendix. You can throw it in the back of the book and put it there for what it's worth. And another reason why people write family history books is to allow other people to add to the story. Maybe you put your book out there and then someone says, oh my gosh, that's that uncle that I know. And I have some information, I have some letters, so maybe someone else might be able to sort of riff off of what you put in your book or in your appendix, and they may be able to produce something on their own, or you may get a letter from that person after your book comes out saying, hey, I know what that is, and that's how we all benefit from sharing genealogy and our interest in family history.
All right, great. Well, I am taking a look at the clock, and I do see that that's probably about all that we have time for today. But thank you all so much to our panelists. This has just been a fascinating conversation. And I know, unfortunately, we've had tons and tons of questions pouring in, really great questions that I would have loved to have gotten to if we had hours before us. So since we probably didn't get to a lot of your questions, do feel free to write into us. We have an excellent free chat service, which you can find at americanancestors.org/chat. I encourage you to check that out. You can chat with our genealogists for free Monday through Friday from 9 to 5 p.m. Eastern Time. Again, that's found at americanancestors.org/chat. Big thank you again to all of our panelists and to Sharon for moderating. Before we wrap up today, I am just going to share some upcoming events that we have. All right, so first up here, we have a free webinar coming up on Thursday this week, Stories from the Archives Scrapbooks, presented by our Collections Management Archivist for our Jewish Heritage Center, Gabrielle Roth, and our conservator, Todd Pattinson, so definitely check that out. Then on November 2nd, we'll have a live panel discussion for our conversation course, Uncovering Wartime Stories, 1918 to 1945. Researching veteran and homefront experiences of the World Wars. That should be a very interesting panel discussion, similar format to today's program. So definitely worth giving that a look as well. And then finally, I invite you to join us on Wednesdays in November for our online course, Verifying Your Mayflower Lineage. You can learn more about these and all of our upcoming events at americanancestors.org/events. Thank you again for joining us today. You will have an opportunity to fill out a survey and give us your feedback on today's webinar. As we continue to expand our webinars and online offerings, any feedback is very helpful and appreciated. This free webinar was made possible by the generous support of our members and friends around the world. Please consider making a gift to American Ancestors to help keep these programs free and to create more. If you'd like to access more how-to resources or learn about our upcoming online educational programs, please visit our online learning center at americanancestors.org/education. Thank you again, and I hope to see you all at our online programs in the future. Goodbye for now.
Okay, bye. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.